Hello. We're today talking about one of the standout teenage films of its period, starring two global treasures, Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, in the 1978 film Grease. We are going to look at what it was, why it mattered then, why it is still so good now, why it mattered to us personally, and whether you should watch it again, maybe with your kids. I'm Mike Harlow.
I'm Tim Woodward. Welcome to Custard Creams.
It's two Brits, a cup of tea, a biscuit, of course, and the very best of popular culture that matters to us and the popular culture that's being forged today.
Thanks, mate. Well, in terms of Grease and what is it? Well, as you said, we're talking about the film Grease, released in September 78 in the UK, and starred John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John as Danny Zuko and Sandy Olsen. Very briefly, it's a teen movie set in the 50s, set in 50s California, and it really follows the adventures of Danny and Sandy as high school sweethearts, essentially breaking up and how they get back together. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's really the heart of it. It was a real rush production. I think they said they planned it in 5 weeks. They shot the entire thing in 2 months, which is super fast, for a Hollywood film. They had a budget of $6 million. It was absolutely panned by the critics when it came out. So when the film came out, it was seriously slagged off. I think the New York Times called it a Klutzburger. I think that the Today Show was really critical, and everyone just said it was a bit of fluff, it was a bit of nonsense. But it goes on to be a massive, massive worldwide success. Takes in $400 million at the box office. But I think also crucially, was teamed up with a hugely successful soundtrack. So the thing about Grease, the musical, it had 4 big hit records. Which we'll come to in a second, but Summer Nights, You're the One That I Want, Sandy, and Hopelessly Devoted to You, all huge hits.
And Grease.
And Grease is the word, yeah, sorry. So that's 5.
Valley.
Five huge hits.
Yeah.
And they were massive songs, massive hits in the UK, 2 number ones, 2 number twos. And that was kind of in the build up to the film coming out.
Yeah.
So, it had a huge amount of momentum behind it when it comes out.
It had aura, didn't it? You knew it was coming. It filled the year. I mean, we'll come on later to, how we felt about it at the time. We were both quite young, weren't we? But yeah. It filled that year. It was the soundtrack to that year. I mean, it was a very distinct year for me because it was the year I spent in North Yorkshire, which is very different to where I mostly grew up. But as for the story, for me, I think the thing that probably the critics missed is the theme of belonging, because I think that's what gives it its perennial appeal. Because yes, it's a love story, but it's a love story that is overlaid by the fact that they're in they're kind of different tracks, aren't they? They're and also they are at that teenage stage of wanting to belong because they're anxious about their status in life. So they're anxious to belong and to identify with certain, really distinct, gangs and uniform for those gangs, etc. But of course, then their natural desires to be with each other and sort of see the best in each other is what wins out in the end. And that I think is the kind of big story. And I think that's what people like about it, what they find attractive about it and engaging about it.
Yeah, and it was so stylized, when you see it. And yeah. I think another one of the reasons why it was so successful was just because it was so different to everything else that was going on around it. And we can come back to that in why does it matter, then. But it was very different to the current trends in US cinema, UK cinema, the fact that it was an original musical as well. This was all completely different to what was going on around it. So, yeah, I think the critics were probably a bit sniffy because it was a musical and it wasn't dark, and it was harking back to the 50s.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of the key bits of 50s nostalgia, which was going on, you know, alongside shows like Happy Days.
Yeah.
So it was very different and it was very out of step. And interestingly, I think when it was re-released for its 40th year anniversary in 2018, The Guardian gave it 5 out of 5 in the UK, whereas they were very sniffy about it in the 70s when it came out. So there's a bit of revisionism going on, that people accept it and understand it and know how influential it's been. So
and also, it's good fun, isn't it? I mean, it's very tongue in cheek. There's a lot of slapstick humour in it, and it's delightful in that it doesn't take itself seriously. It kind of, and it's interesting what you said about, you know, Alan Carr and the people behind it and the speed at which they did it. You know, they knew it was fun, and they weren't trying to find some massive deep meaning in it or get something, you know, some complicated concept over. It was just good, you know, stagey kind of musical fun, and I think it, you know, that's why it's so great, and that's why it, you know, continues to entertain today.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I said a lot of it was done quite a bit on the hoof as well. I think the choreographer, someone called, I think Patty Birch, who was an original West Side Story dancer, but she made up a lot of the choreography literally on the hoof. You know, she famously did the choreography to You're the One That I Want there and then, just literally made it up. And they just did it over 7 hours. So none of it was pre-planned. I think probably because they didn't have a massive budget.
So let's talk a bit about the cast, because you know, this was, I mean, John Travolta was already famous, wasn't he? But who else was in for that role? Was he the first choice?
No, I mean, the interesting thing about that is we mentioned the 50s nostalgia wave. So just very quickly, I mean, the director they hired, that Carr hires, is a guy called Randall Kleiser. He's a rookie director as well. He's not done anything before, so he's a first timer. But he happened to be George Lucas's college flatmate, as in George Lucas, who at the time was making Star Wars, and also went to make a 50s nostalgia film called American Graffiti as well. So again, he's brand new to it. Travolta was only 23, but their first choice, or Alan Carr's first choice, was the Fonz, was Henry Winkler. So there was, you know, well, a hugely long-running sitcom, Happy Days, set in the 50s, you know, a very kind of Americana hometown. Henry Winkler played the Fonz, who was a kind of bequiffed biker, super cool, you know, great with the ladies, wisecracking. Also, interestingly, probably quite a lot older than the character who was played as well. But Henry Winkler turned it down because he said he didn't want to be typecast as a kind of a greaser, biker, rock and roller. Obviously, looking back, he realised it was a terrible mistake and he should have done it, but he refused it at the time. Travolta gets the chance to do it because Robert Stigwood has got a 3-film deal with him. He did Saturday Night Fever, and Stigwood suggests, when Winkler says no, Stigwood says, well, John Travolta could do this. So he gets on board.
I think I've told you before, I was once fondled by the Fonz in pantomime. He was starring in a pantomime in Richmond, and he ran round, as they often do, the characters at some point in the show, and he, I don't know, for some reason he ruffled my hair. Not that I have much hair, so it was more of a fondling. But so what I find interesting about that is, in a way, if you think about the character, kind of Henry Winkler sounds better, really, because he sounds more of a rocker. When you look at John Travolta, he looks the part, but then when he moves, he's really quite sort of gawky and angular, and he's not thick set, you know, a sort of hard man type vibe to him. He's got this sort of kooky, dancey. He's extraordinary. I mean, he's got just watching. He is mesmerising on screen. You're drawn to watching him because his movements and his expressions are quite jerky, and you know they're just really engaging. I think he draws your eye in a lot. Obviously, Olivia Newton-John does, but and the Rizzo, the Stockard Channing role are kind of my favourite. So tell us about Olivia Newton-John. She was was this the first film she'd been in? Was this?
I think she'd made one film before, a sci-fi disaster called Tomorrow, T-O-O, which I think was a terrible film. She wasn't first choice, so like Travolta, they had other people in mind. They wanted Carrie Fisher. He's good mates George Lucas. He's shooting Star Wars. They went to watch Carrie Fisher on set. The reason Carrie Fisher didn't get the role is they weren't convinced she had the dancing or singing ability to do it. Their first choice was Marie Osmond. So Osmond's obviously a massive band at the time. Marie Osmond agreed to do it, but when she saw the script, she rejected it because she was a Mormon and she wouldn't do the transformation from goody two-shoes Sandra Olsen to biker hot chick with cigarettes and alcohol. So she rejected it. Carl met Olivia Newton-John at a dinner party and thought, great, she will be ideal for this, because Olivia Newton-John was still a big music star at the time. Kleiser, the director, didn't rate her, didn't want her for the part, didn't see what she could bring to it. But Travolta really, really backed her. He lobbied really hard to get her the chance to do it. She wasn't convinced about doing it. She had a good music career. She was worried this was going to potentially be another bomb. So she said she wouldn't do an accent. So they had to rewrite her backstory. The reason she's Australian is she said she wouldn't do an American accent. So they rewrote the story because she's, if you like, an American in the original stage show. She also said that she needed to have a screen test with Travolta because she needed to see if there was any chemistry between them. Apparently, they do a screen test. It's fantastic. They both know they're going to do it straight after that. So, yeah, she signs up and she does it. As I say, you mentioned Stockard Channing. There's a guy called Jeff Conaway does the role of Kaniki. He's kind of Danny Zuko's number two in the male gang, the T-Birds. He'd done the stage show. Actually, Travolta had also done the stage show. He'd been one of the T-Birds in the stage show, so not the main part. So he gets the chance to do it.
There is something you have to suspend when you're watching it, which is your understanding of age, because they don't look like teenagers. There's something only after a while you think, this is weird, because I'm not sure what age they are. They're all at high school, but they all look like they're in their mid-20s. And the reality is they are all in their mid-20s or even early 30s. I think Stockard Channing was 33 when she did it.
Yeah. She was the oldest, but they were all old.
Yeah, and if you can't remember who Stockard Channing was or the character was, Rizzo was the one with short cropped hair, who was the one that thought she was pregnant and turned out she wasn't. Very charismatic, had the slightly edgier plot line to pursue, and was Jed Bartlett's wife in West Wing, is how a lot of people have seen her more recently, I think.
A really, really unusual thing. They had a crow's feet test. So the director said that they wanted adults because it was quite an adult storyline, but anyone who had crow's feet on their eyes wouldn't be allowed in. So, They knew it was slightly surreally pitched in terms of the age.
Okay. You think we're out of contention for the remake then?
Probably.
So, how did it do? Come back to the music, because the music, I think, in a way, took on a life of its own, didn't it? But how did the film do?
Yeah, I mean, the film did incredibly well. So, anyone who's not seen it, I'd recommend you see it. People who saw it at the time, like me and you, will remember it being absolutely massive, like you said. So it took $400 million at the box office worldwide. It was the biggest grossing musical for over 30 years, until I think Mamma Mia pipped it in 2008. It still holds the box office record in the States for a musical at almost, I think, $200 million, dollars. So it was an enormous success, and cinematically, it was a massive success. Not really, again, Oscars-wise. I think Hopelessly Devoted for You was nominated as the best original song, but lost out. But the soundtrack was massive. So, I certainly remember hugely fondly the double gatefold sleeve album with the picture from the still from the film on the front, which was a real premium, record for anyone of my age.
And you bought it, did you?
No, I didn't, Mike. I asked for it, and because it was quite expensive as a double album, my parents got me a knockoff version, which was the Grease soundtrack that was done by the Pickwick Grease Monkeys on the Pickwick record label. So it was a single album of covers, which I still loved, but it was probably terrible. But my neighbour had the double album, and I remember going round to his house and like looking at it and thinking, "Oh, that's so good." We'll take a break there. Thanks so much for listening to Custard Creams, and remember to check out our YouTube channel, Custard Cream TM, or subscribe our podcasts at Podbean or Spotify. This week's episode has been brought to you by nextone'sawinner.com. And nextone'sawinner.com really get why it's so good to be able to place bets from the comfort of your own home while you still got one. Why traipse down to the betting shop through the cold and wet, just appear at a TV from 1992, clutching a little blue pen and watching the racing from Carlisle, and breathing in the heady aromas of Lambert and Butlers and desperation. That really kills the gambling experience for me. So if you'd love to place a bet, or you just really would need to, and you don't want your wife, your civil partner or spouse to find out, or you just want to really try our addictive and fun and algorithmically targeted casino games, check out nextone'sawinner.com/kidscasino. And it's so simple to get started. Just go to nextone'sawinner.com and open your account today. You'll need your bank account details, your sort code and your account number, mortgage information and approximate property value, and proof of your disposable income. And Next One Winner will give you a free bet of up to £5 and 2 free spins on the Snakes and Losers casino game. Remember, gambling is cool and fun, and it will make you popular and attractive. But if your life is starting to crumble around you, like a Weetabix flood barrier, please remember to give up for a few weeks. Gamble responsibly.
So, it was a great film of its time, but I think the real question in a re-review, if you like, is it just history, or has it got themes, relevance to today, and is it worth watching? And I think that what's possibly relevant to that was, of course, as you said, 1978 was the film, but it was a film about the 50s, so it was already out of context, and yet was massively successful. So it was the magic formula. What was the thing that people really engaged with it still something that they can engage with today because it has timeless themes? Discuss.
Well, I think you're right, and drawing that sort of comparison between now and then, the point you make about 50s nostalgia is really important because, as we've touched on already, 70s America, it's dark, it's Watergate, it's Nixon, it's Vietnam. Again, it's also got the oil shortages. It's a difficult time in the States. That's reflected in their cinema of the time. When you're looking at the big films, are kind of The Godfather, The Deer Hunter, Taxi Driver, challenging, darker films, All the President's Men. All of these things were dark and gritty and tough and brown and 70s. French Connection, things like that. This was consciously looking back 20 years. And the people who wrote the stage show, I say Warren Casey, Jim Jacobs, that's what they did. They were listening to Led Zeppelin and thought, harking back to their own high school days, why don't people like doo-wop music anymore, and didn't we have a great time? And that's why they did it. And it also coincides with Happy Days on TV, quite a lot of 50s nostalgia, Laverne and Shirley, another TV show, set in that time. George Lucas makes American Graffiti. So there was quite a big look back to the 50s because it was brighter, it was exciting, it was when teenagers came to life, it was Elvis Presley. It was a bit of an antidote to what was going on in the 70s in the States and really here. I think that's still relevant today.
It slightly mocked it, didn't it? In that it poked a bit of fun in it because there's a bit when is it National Bandstand, the TV program where they obviously film live people in high schools dancing and make a competition of it, and they do a hand jive, which is literally what it sounds, which is the dance is the hands moving around, and it's really obviously naff and slightly childish. It's the sort of thing you'd expect people to be doing at a kids' party. So, they're not. It's not revering the 50s, is it? I guess it's and it's got some salacious themes in there as well. I mean, it's not as overt as many films, but there is, there's drinking and excess and gang fighting and sexual advances and teenage pregnancies. There's quite a lot of spice in it as well, isn't there? So
yeah, it's very gritty, I think, really. And to pick on a few other things, I think the 50s stuff was, they were laughing with it as much as anything else, because it was
It's
a
joyful,
more innocent time. It was before a lot of this stuff had started to go wrong. It was pre the sexual revolution. It was relatable, but it seemed sweeter, more innocent, even though actually the film, as you say, is very gritty. And, that's why it came out as an A over here and probably should have been a double A. And if you read the BBFC report on it, they took the view that although it probably deserved that higher certificate, it was done in such a warm, teen-friendly, cartoony way that they felt it was okay and they could give it the A certificate. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the songs have got quite saucy lyrics.
That's really interesting, because that's picking up the whole theme of the film, really, isn't it? Because it all resolves in the end, a bit like, I think, some and ends with the big dance. It reminds me, I don't know much about Bollywood movies, but I did wonder whether there's a sort of a touch of the Bollywoods in it, in that all the stories are neatly tied off. Everyone ends up pretty happy in the end. Everyone ends up on the same literal field doing a big dance, and I mean, but it goes back to the theme of in teenage years, you're anxious about your sense of belonging, your location. We have people who don't know whether they're in the gang, whether they're, you get stresses. At one point, Danny starts dressing not like the gang, and you can see them getting anxious about whether, the gang's still happening. And, so they're anxious when they're dressing in the gang, and whether they actually, he's missing out on having a great relationship with Sandy, because he has to be so cool that he can't be seen with her because she looks preppy. And when he changes and dresses towards the end, she dresses like he does, and he dresses like she does, in the kind of jockey preppy way. Their mates are worried that somehow he's leaving them behind. So all that status, location, belonging, anxiety actually is overcome in lots of those relationships that are built through the film by actually it's being yourself, and being able to relate to the people you love that really matters. And it's that sort of, we're actually all a lot more like each other than we would care to admit at times, and therefore actually life's a lot easier and better, and you don't have to worry so much about your status. It will work out in the end.
Look, it's got universal themes, which, as you say, is the gangs. The T-Birds are the classic rocker gang. The Pink Ladies are the female gang. That will be replicated right now in current schools with kids, well, not their age because they're all 40, but kids who are actually sixth formers and younger. That's a universal theme for any kid and any teenager. You identify with that straight away. You identify with a boy meets girl, boy breaks up, boy tries to get it back. Again, that's a very universal storyline. It's a love story at the heart of it, with a bit of action and car racing in between, and good humour. So I think there's a lot of universality to it, which is why it stands the test of time, and why you could watch it now. You could watch it in 78. You could probably watch it at any time, and you still enjoy those things. Did
you ever fancy anyone who you thought, she's not going to be interested in me because to her I must look like, I'm going to end up being inadvertently rude about you here, but I must look like a nerd, or somebody who dresses poorly in shiny sports gear, because I did.
Again, I think a very common theme for teenagers, which
Yeah, you're
is
not answering my question though.
oh yeah, well, I certainly, I'm sure I did. I can't think of one immediately now because obviously I was incredibly popular, Mike, because I was funny, handsome, and hard. But no, I think all boys can identify with that. You know, you start gravitating towards the girls that you fancy, and that might mean the sort of music that you might be tempted to say you like, the way you might dress.
So I think the reason it sticks with me personally is, as you say, because it was so different, because the music was surround sound for that whole, it felt like months of, it being in the charts, it being on the radio, and it was a very distinctive year for me because I spent almost all my childhood in the southeast of England, but went to Stokesley in North Yorkshire, which, for those who don't live in the UK, is going from Berkshire to Yorkshire is about as culturally different as you can find within one country, I think. I walked into Stokesley Primary School saying, "Good afternoon. I have joined your primary school. I'm very, very good to make your acquaintance." And then by the time I got back to Mum that evening, it was, "Hey up, mother, what's thou having for tea?" Because it was extraordinary. I had to survive. So I literally changed my accent within a few days. And so I have these really strong memories. When you make a change like that in life, you end up with a really strong imprint, I think, don't you? And the soundtrack for that is Grease. Particularly, actually, I have to say that Grease is the word.
I mean, personally, I remember it hugely fondly. I think I remember two films from that age, sort of primary school age, that were enormous for me, and that would be Star Wars and Grease. Grease possibly more than Star Wars at the time for its impact, because Star Wars was, again, something slightly different. I mean, I remember, being desperate to see Grease, and it was the first film I'd had to go 3 times because the queue was round the block. So literally, my parents took me 3 times before we actually got into the film, which obviously adds to the anticipation as well.
You couldn't book online, no?
No, you couldn't book online. Then it was queuing around the block for the Stockton-on-Tees Odeon. But it had such an impact in our primary school. I remember literally kids cutting out from white cotton material T-birds and sewing that on the back of nylon tracksuit tops, and being in the school playground and telling people to get off because this was T-birds turf. I'd love my kids to sit and see it. I'm gonna make them sit and watch it because I think those universal themes of being, for my two lads, who are teenagers, who are, as you say, desperate to fit in, be one of the gang, be a tough guy, also, be of interest to the girl. They will identify with that straight away, even though they might be resistant to start with. I do think they would love it.
I would recommend it for anyone at an age who would actually enjoy it, I think, rather than worrying so much about the content, as you say. I think it's, one of those lots of those films where it can play at different, levels. So the adults can pick up on all the themes and the kids pick up on the themes that are, fine and wholesome, because it's not that overt. So, I suspect something like 10, 11 onwards is a good age. But I think probably if you have gone through, say, more like 13, 14, that where my girls are now, where there's quite a lot of, how do you identify with the gang, and there's quite a lot of, I don't really associate with that type of person. I won't use the languages, the words that they use, but they definitely are kind of like, oh no, she's a and he's a and that sort of tribalism, and finding which side of that you fall, even if you don't really particularly want to fall, but you can't be in the middle and you can't be nobody. That, I think, knowing that writ large in your life, it means that the film is very kind of helpful, really. It's like watching a soap opera and getting some life lessons out of it or something. So that was quite a lot of words about a film that we obviously both hold dear, and would heartily recommend people watch again, refresh, watch with friends, watch with your kids. And we'll leave you in summary with the best words that we can find, and those are of Frankie Valli. We start believing now that we can be who we are.
Greece, as we know, is the word.